Hi, George Durkee from Columbia College GIS, and in this video we're going to take a look at WatchDuty, which is a pretty darned incredible app for your phone or desktop that'll show you location of fires and all sorts of information about that fire. For those of you who have taken or will take my emergency incident mapping class and my ArcGIS online class. We'll do some of this stuff in those classes. And so you'll see that WatchDuty uses all the same feature layers we've been teaching to. Most all of them are publicly available and pretty easy to put together a map. And then we'll also take a look at how the symbology, labeling, and everything makes everything stand out pretty good as an easy to read map. And that'll be useful for all of you folks doing any sort of map work, because obviously that's the point, is to make sure that your maps are easy to read. I'm putting this video together as major downslope winds are hitting Southern California. Down there they're called Santa Ana winds, but they're also called Mono winds farther north, the Central Sierra. And what's happening is you have a difference between a low pressure system to the east, and they're coming down off a mountain slope, and the pressure differential is driving them. So in this case, the winds were hitting 30 miles an hour was average, with gusts up in the 60s and 70s. And once a fire starts in something like that, basically you can't stop it. You can probably mitigate it with fuel reduction in high fire danger areas, which is most of us in California, and of course, hardening houses so that the embers of the houses don't add to a ember storm, which is what's happening here, in addition to the embers of the vegetation. Anyway, I think WatchDuty's now been around maybe almost 3 years now. And as I said, it's a phone app. It will alert you to a fire if you have the settings right. And for a small subscription fee, you get a couple of other features with it. So let's just take a look at what's available both on the desktop, which is what we're looking at here, and on the phone app, which will be the same. So take a look at the layers, and it allows you to choose a base map, and you can get satellite or topographic or the street one. You can see the fire perimeters. So it'll have active fire perimeters, which are either uh, direct from the fire mappers or from the aircraft doing infrared and mapping it. And that's becoming a lot more common. And it's getting those data in pretty good time. They're showing up pretty close to when they're uh, made available. And then it also has available, I've got it off right now, but historical fire perimeters. And that's really useful, A, to show how fire prone California is in the wildland urban interface. The fires are, of course, a natural part of our Mediterranean climate. And, and so it's also useful to give an idea of when a fire is burning, you'll often see the fire slowing down, or at least a better defense is able to be made when it hits an area that's burned within, say, the last 10 years before fuel has built back up to levels that'll carry a fire rapidly. So then we can look, you can also see, it'll show you two types of satellite hotspots, VERS and MODIS, which are both satellite imaging systems, and I teach those in my classes. And we'll turn on VERS here, and you'll notice that it shows the hotspots here of still active fire, and it also dates them according to a color ramp here. And you can look at all that in the legend. It'll tell you what color corresponds to what else. Now, if you pay them a small amount, I think it's like $25 a year, you also get the flight tracker, which will show you responding aircraft from CAL FIRE usually, but anybody else that has firefighting aircraft also turn on and off power outages. And I've found that being able to do that, and again, I teach this in my class, is to include power outages because one, it's useful to know where your power is, whether power is on or off. But the power companies do a pretty darn good job of turning power off immediately when there's a fire. And before WatchDuty, that was actually a good way of figuring out where the fire was because generally fires aren't mapped and the maps published for as long as 6 hours to even a full day. And it's gotten a lot better. WatchDuty, again, is just doing an outstanding job of any major fire getting stuff out there. Uh, but using the satellite hotspot imagery, which is about every 12 hours. I think that doesn't happen often, but other clues like power outage and aircraft, you'll see the spotter aircraft circling the area of the fire pretty quickly nowadays, and especially in Tuolumne County, as I think all of you know, the Columbia Airport has air tankers and spotter planes based there and a couple of helicopters. So we have really rapid response within Tuolumne County. And the other cool thing here is the live cameras, which are all over the state. And I'll turn this off in just a bit so you can see it better, but we'll go through what's available here. And then you've got several choices for weather specific feature classes. You've got fire weather and red flag warnings, which I've turned off for the moment because a good rule in a map is just not to put too many competing colors and data on there. So always consider the main data that you want on there to make your point of what you're trying to say with your map. Don't clutter it up. But fire weather red flag warnings, obviously is important, but that's usually important ahead of an actual fire. Once the fire is burning, once it's large, then knowing you're in a red flag warning isn't especially helpful anymore. But it has surface wind direction, and as we get closer, or as I uh, X out of this, you'll see how they symbolize that. And then an air quality index, which is also really useful in fire areas, and you get an idea of where that smoke is spreading. And they've also recently added a professional level, which you pay a slightly higher fee for, but it shows the ownership and responsibility of the various lands. So these feature levels, feature classes, are very useful for responders. So fire and police and all those people, want to know who owns what, and that's important for things like setting backfires and things like that, making sure everybody's informed of what's going on, critical infrastructure, and pre-planned evacuation zones. And increasingly, and I'll talk about this a little bit in the class, all fire-prone areas are going to designating certain sections as giving it a label, a number, uh, and then they can evacuate section by section, depending on the fire or the earthquake or tornado or whatever. And so that's useful, but only as long as people know what their evacuation zone is. And we've had discussions about that in our GIS advisory group on just how useful it is. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of mixed. But as long as it's mapped, that is, you can't just give out a list of evacuation zones, nor a list of streets and so on bounding an evacuation zone. That's why, back or we put out our first map like this, I think about 2017 or so. A couple of us in our GIS advisory group did maps of a fire in Yosemite and here in Tuolumne County. And I think those were among the first public maps to show where a fire was, what road closures were, and just the basics. And so that's developed not necessarily because of us. It's a logical thing to do. But the point of that is that we were frustrated that evacuations were given pretty much just through text. That is, you'd get a text or an announcement on the radio telling you an evacuation zone was being designated, and it would just give streets, which is great. I mean, if you really know your area, you might or might not know if you're inside or outside that area. But what you really need is a map, and on that map, you can look up your address. And this is especially true in recreation areas. You might just be visiting in a hotel or a B&B or whatever, and then you can use your phone. You look up the address, and you see if you're inside or outside the zone, the evacuation zone, which you highlight in red or some other color to show that it's a required evacuation or a recommended get ready evacuation zone. Okay, so anyway, those are the basic feature classes you have available, and you can see here they've done a great job of symbolizing. We'll start with the aircraft because they're pretty cool, symbolizing helicopter versus a fixed wing. And at the moment, I'm just seeing spotter planes, and then they give you the track, which, if you looked at flight radar, that'll show you the aircraft as well. But WatchDuty edits for only responding fire aircraft. So let's take a look at a couple of other things here. Notice how it symbolizes a fire, and if we look at the legend, we'll find that the Sunset Fire had broken out but is now suppressed, and it's shown just in that light yellowish there, whereas the Paradise Fire, right now it's covered up by labels, but I'll try and zoom in later and get it. We'll show an active symbol. But also notice each aircraft not only gives you its flight path, but is symbolized with its number. And if you click on it, it gives you exactly what it is, helitanker. It's a Chinook Type 1 response, and it's going 97 miles an hour. So that's all really good. And if you watch it on any fire, you'll also notice the spotter aircraft. Those are the small fixed wings. And up here comes a air tanker right here. We'll let it get a little bit below the top bar there. So that's tanker 41. And you click on that and you find that it's a Type 1 LAT. Well, anyway, fairly large. And you often see that coming in just right behind a spotter aircraft, which will give it the route and where it wants to dump the retardant. So here's a spotter aircraft. They'll have the AA designation. Okay, so next, let's look at the labeling here. It shows the evacuation shelters, and that's another incredible addition to all of these maps, is showing evacuation shelters and what you can bring there. This doesn't quite have it, but a lot of them will tell you how many spaces are available, whether you can bring small or large animals. And I think to the north here, yeah, here's a small animal shelter up here at the high school. And notice how the labels are made such that they work on several backgrounds. And so notice how on the text here, it adds the halo in the background. So down here in the white, that halo doesn't show up too well, but when it's over the colors here, it makes the contrast such that you can see it pretty easily. So it's an incredibly useful feature to have when you're doing labels. And then notice too the symbology of the wind. The length of the wind trail gives an idea of the speed. And so yesterday, these were incredibly long tails as the average wind speed was up around 30 miles an hour. And as I said, the gusts were coming in at 60 or so. And a fire like that, you're just not going to stop it. But it was actually pretty illustrative of exactly what was happening because you just got a narrow band of wind coming right over this fire area. And so both, if you were trying to get out of there, it would emphasize how serious this fire was and how critical it was that you just get out of there because nothing was going to stop it. And again, here's the Palisade Fire symbol. And that also shows these blue dots are yet another cool feature. These are the cameras that are now all over California. UC San Diego operates them. They went through a change in operation just this last year. Anyway, UC San Diego now does them. And you can not only, right now they're not pointing to the fire, or at least this one isn't, but you can also get time, 15 minutes, for instance, of of was what was going on for 15 minutes of photos. A bunch of these got burned over and are no longer transmitting. So anyway, I don't really have too much else here. I just wanted to introduce folks to both the WatchDuty app. It's free, although as I said, if you pay them, I think $25 a year, you get the aircraft here and I think one other feature. But otherwise, you get all the features here. And we'll just take a look at the legend here and just show you. So here's, the fires and the symbology for whether it's active or whether it's considered out. Animal shelters are all symbolized here. And again, most all of this are available publicly through either the ArcGIS Online data set available, either on Pro or Arc Online, or the Atlas section. And the other good thing that's happening in the fire world is that people are starting to come together on the symbology for the various types of evacuation. So evacuation order is going to use that reddish with the lines there, and evacuation warning will be more of a yellow. But it shows the Oregon, Washington, which also includes a level 1, be ready. And California was doing that for a while, but I think it's pretty much decided there's only going to be 2 evacuation states. It'll be an evacuation warning where there's a threat and it could get to you. You should have everything piled together and ready to go, and an evacuation order, which is leave right now, and it's a lawful order, and the police will come through and make sure everybody gets out and help you along if you refuse. So anyway, take a look at WatchDuty app.watchduty.org on your desktop, or download it from either Mac or iOS or Android, whichever, and install the app. Like I said, it's free. I would strongly encourage you to support them by sending them the yearly low fee, and that way you get the responding aircraft and probably other features in the future. And then set up the notifications so that you'll get its unique bing when there's a fire in your area. You can set it for at the county level. So if there's a fire in the county, it'll notify you. And at the moment, they don't have it any smaller than that, but county level is pretty good. Or if you're traveling, you still get notified, of course, when there's a fire back home, which is also useful. Oh, and finally, you do have the ability to look up your address or any other bit of data that's on the map. On the side, you'll have a pullout where you can search address or place, and it'll tell you if you're, for instance, in an evacuation zone or not. And then you can also look up other fires. And so if you know the name of a fire, it'll take you to that. So let's just zoom out here and just get a look at what's going on here. Anyway, there you go. Like I said, I want folks to have an idea of what a good map looks like. It's well thought out and no extra charge. It's incredibly useful. It's what you can do when you create an app for public information, and they've just done a really terrific job here. So thanks, and I hope you haven't already, sign up for my classes, and I'll see you later.